well, you're a filmmaker. Why don't you make a film? I thought, well, I can't afford to make a documentary, but I just seen this wonderful film. How many of you have seen The Story of Stuff? Some of you have seen that with this woman, Annie Leonard, and I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. You just have somebody talk, and you make it kind of funny, and it's sort of this comedy monologue, and it makes the point. And I knew Annie Leonard, so I called her up, and I said, hey, Annie, how would you like to be the host of this film? And she said, well, I'm kind of busy, but I don't think I really can do it. But you know who ought to do this for you? This guy, Dave Batker. And I knew Dave. We didn't know each other real well, but I knew him. This guy, Dave Batker, he's great. He's funny, and he's actually a real economist. In fact, he's duh, you know. In fact, he's like the only economist who ever worked for both the World Bank and Greenpeace. Yeah, I said, well, maybe I'll check this out. And so I got Dave, and he turned out to be great. I said, well, Dave, you're not as cute as Annie, but nonetheless, you work really well. And so Dave hosted the film, What's the Economy For Anyway? We're going to show you a little clip of that now, and then I'm going to come up and do my part of this and read a tiny bit from the book, and then Dave will do his part, and then we'll throw it open to you. We get questions, comments, tomatoes, whatever you want. The one thing you're not going to get is a PowerPoint, because we believe that power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely, so you don't have to worry about that tonight. Why don't we get started with a film, and let's see where we go. Thank you.
The economy. It was issue number 1 in the last election, sending Barack Obama to the White House with a mandate to fix it. It dominates conversation. Bailouts, food prices, foreclosures, credit squeeze. We're all in it together. Hi, I'm Dave Batker. I'm just an ordinary American, like, you know, Joe the plumber. But I'm also an economist. I've worked for the World Bank. Okay, I've also worked for Greenpeace. And I want to talk to you about this economy everybody's talking about. What's it for anyway? And is it working? Can it work better? You've probably heard about how some people measure economic success. Wall Street checks its stocks. Are they up or down? The government checks inflation, unemployment, housing starts, consumer confidence. But the king of all economic measures is the GDP. That's shorthand for the gross domestic product. The grosser it gets, the better we assume the economy to be. But what is the GDP anyway?
The GDP is the total market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given year.
GDP measures what we made here this year and paid for. If we pay, then GDP goes up, unless we're paying for stuff made somewhere else. We buy a lot of that, but it doesn't count, at least not for us. There are other things that don't count either, like volunteering in my community. It's a waste of time as far as the GDP is concerned. So is that daily walk I try to take, and the time I spend with my son. Unless I buy him stuff, that counts. But remember that big oil spill in Alaska? It made you want to cry, didn't it? But the GDP was laughing all the way to the bank. Because first, there was money spent to clean it up. Then those huge legal bills. The spill added more to the GDP than if the oil had made it safely to the refinery. Seriously. Maybe Bobby Kennedy said it best.
It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are American.
Once upon a time, our country had no idea how much stuff we made, and nobody cared. Until the Great Depression, when our government adopted national economic goals and needed a way of measuring their achievement. The economist Simon Kuznets laid out the GDP in 1934. During World War II, it was an important tool in measuring how many guns, tanks, and bombs we were building. Even then, Kuznets warned against making too much of his measure. But Kuznets is history, not the GDP though. With all the attention it gets, you'd think boosting the GDP is what the economy is for. That's what a lot of economists will tell you too.
The economy's purpose is to produce more and more goods and services that people...
Doesn't matter what they are, if money is spent on them, they must be goods. And the more of them, the better. What the consumer wants, the consumer gets. Economists call that consumer sovereignty. Buyer knows best. Case closed. Or is it? Actually, there's an American tradition that's older than GDP. About 100 years ago, Gifford Pinchot became the first director of the U.S. Forest Service. He wasn't a wild-eyed radical. He was a Republican. Pinchot believed that the purpose of the economy was the greatest good for the greatest number over the longest run. Think about it. Take the greatest good. What do you think that means?
The good life to me is having a job that's in your field that you're passionate about.
To me, family is very important.
And always having someone there to help you through hard times.
Having good health, nothing burning down financially, having everything stable.
It's all about quality of life, isn't it? Pursuit of happiness. Money's part of that. Stuff is part of that, but only part. Family, friends, health matter more. So how are we doing?
Okay, we can stop the film. Thank you.
Now we all know.
Now we all know. All right. So that just gives you a little flavor of the absurdity of the movie.
We all know.
Now we all know. All right. So that just gives you a little flavor of the absurdity of the movie, which was absurd enough that a publisher was willing to pay to turn it into a book. And so that became What's the Economy For Anyway? And we do a lot of things in this book. We examine this whole question of GDP and then what this good life consists of and how we might make the economy if, in fact, we were interested in the greatest good for the greatest number over the longest run. And we make some comparisons to other countries and how they're doing certain kind of things. And one of the things we point out is that Duke University and Harvard University really recently did a survey of 4,000 Americans. And they gave them a choice of 3 hypothetical questions. See, I can't even count. I'm holding up 4 fingers and saying 3. That was strong wine. Who got the wine tonight? All right, 3 countries and hypothetical question asking them, where would you choose to live? In country A, where the top 20% of the population, you're thinking Occupy already, the top 20% of the population owns 20% of the wealth, or country B, where the top 20% of the population owns 35% of the wealth, or country C, where the top 20% of the population owns 80% of the wealth, and asked 4,000 Americans what they thought. And so I'm going to ask you this. I want a show of hands, even though I won't be able to see any of them. But I want a show of hands from you. How many of you would choose to live in country A, where there's this sort of perfect equality? 20% owns 20% of the wealth. Raise your hand. I see one hand back there. You're the only one in the light. Are there any others? Maybe you need to yell aye. That many? Whoa, okay. Okay, welcome to North Korea. Now, country B, where the top 20% owns 35% of the wealth. How many of you would take country B? Yeah, okay. And country C, where the top 20% earns over 80% of the national wealth. Ooh, we are preaching to the choir tonight. I can tell that. Well, anyway, here's what actually happened. 82% of Americans chose country B, including 75% of those Americans who identified themselves as conservative Republicans. 10% of the country chose country A, that is North Korea or some place. There's actually no country in the world that has perfect equality like that. And only 8% of the population chose country C, including about 12% of those people who identified themselves as conservative Republicans. Well, there's an interesting thing. There is no country A, absolutely not even North Korea. There is a country B. That country is the most egalitarian country in the world. What is it called? It's called Sweden, that's right. Good. This is a smart audience. You don't even need to hear us. We should probably just start signing books now. But, and then what's country C? 2084. Oh, say that again. United. Oh, yeah, well, no, they're even worse. The United States is country C. So, in other words, some 82% of Americans polled, of the 4,000 Americans polled by Harvard and Duke, chose Sweden over the United States. The book is a little edgy. We wanted it to be that. We wanted it to be accessible. Some of the critics call it breezy, but, you know, goes by in a New York minute. You can read it really fast. You can put it on your Kindle, do whatever you want. Anyway, here's the deal. I'm going to read just a little bit from the introduction and then a couple of short things from a couple of the chapters to give you a little flavor of the book, because this, after all, is a book reading. This is from the introduction. As we write this introduction on May 22nd, 2011, the end of the world, predicted for yesterday by evangelist Harold Camping, has been unexpectedly delayed. Darn it, don't you hate it when that happens? Its coming was headlined in newspapers and trumpeted by millions of dollars in advertising, including full-page ads in USA Today and thousands of scary billboards. Mr. Camping has now offered a new date for the apocalypse, October 21st, 2011. Around the date of the publication of this book. So if you're reading it, it probably didn't happen. And if it did, please don't blame our publisher. Of course, most people consider Harold Camping crazy, including us. Few expected his predicted rapture to actually occur. Most of us believe in facts and evidence, and yet with regards to our economy, myths still abound. For some of our political leaders, the solution to the crisis that hit us in 2008 is to do more of what caused it, only faster. Privatize more, deregulate more, cut the taxes more, et cetera, et cetera. That those leaders can still push these myths and be taken seriously means that a real understanding of how our economy works, what we want from it, and how we might reach those goals remains to be won. We hope to contribute a little bit to that ultimate victory. So that's basically gives you, I think, a flavor of what we're trying to do in this book. And I'm going to read for a little bit from Chapter 4, the chapter on health, unhealthy at any cost.